Tara Palmeri and Franco Ordoñez are in our Washington bureau. Both are White House reporters. Tara is with Politico and Franco is with McClatchy, D.C. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
So much to talk about. Let's start with this. Russia's foreign minister mocked the Trump administration for not having one clear voice on its foreign policy. After this trip, do you think Rex Tillerson has asserted himself as the leading voice? Tara, I'll start with you.
I think that's still to be seen. They need to be coordinating better. There needs to be less freelancing in terms of what everyone's idea is within the foreign policy. I think that, you've seen Nikki Haley be much more aggressive than Tillerson, but they've all, after a few days of discrepancy, have decided that they would like to have Assad removed. But this is something that should come from the executive branch. This should come from the White House, and they should be the ones who are coordinating with all of the players on one message. But even the president's message keeps switching all the time. In the past week, he went from saying Assad should stay, Assad should be removed, to, oh, we'll have to figure something out. So it's not surprising that the people who are working for him are tap dancing around the issue, because the president's he changes his mind every other day.
Franco, what do you think? Is there any more clarity after Secretary of State Tillerson's trip?
Clarity, I think, is a really hard thing to find right now in these last few days, especially with this administration. As Tara was saying, Russia, the back and forth. Just a few weeks ago, months ago, we're talking about Russia making historic rapprochement. Now we're saying relations are worse than ever, and that's just one of the issues that it's happening on flipping the script on Syria, on China. Clarity is kind of something that we definitely do not have, and really there are a lot of big questions about what this administration's foreign policy really is.
Well, it was interesting to watch. We heard President Trump say relations with Russia are at a low amid these disagreements over Syria. Franco, let me ask you, has this, you think, changed the conversation about possible collusion between the Kremlin and Trump associates during the election, or is that still a somewhat separate issue?
I think they're a bit intertwined. Well, I think they're definitely separate issues. And the way I say they're intertwined is you have definitely some cynical groups, and they're not just Democrats, by the way. There are some Republican national security experts who are raising big questions about the timing of this kind of flip-flop on Russia, and asking questions, very pointed questions, about whether this conversation, this turn in such an aggressive change in language about Russia has something to do with those investigations. Are they trying to distance themselves? Are they trying to insulate themselves? I think it's really too early to say that, but that is something that is being more than whispered about.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Tara? Because I thought it was interesting as well that there were no actual pictures of Secretary of State Tillerson meeting with Vladimir Putin, that, in fact, the Secretary of State ditched his travel pool, the group of reporters that travels oftentimes with high-profile officials. What do you think about this? Is the conversation changing, or is it intertwined, as Franco just laid out?
Well, I think that the fact that the Kremlin wouldn't agree to meet with Tillerson until a few hours before, that was probably it was seen as a slight, and it was intentional. That was their way of showing that this is not a cozy relationship. And they came out saying, Tillerson came out saying that we're at an all-time low earlier than that. So did they really want to have a photo op? And you have to understand that the Russians are very secretive. They're not about transparency. Tillerson has made it known that he doesn't love being around the media. He wouldn't even bring a pool with him on his last trip. So the two of them, I'm guessing, just did not want to have any photographs where, what were they going to do, smile, stare sternly at each other? But I think that it is possible that the Trump administration is stepping away from Russia and changing its position to change the narrative on the investigation. Even Donald Trump Jr. said, see, my dad is tough on Russia. There's no way he was complicit in any sort of talks in the campaign. So this is a new talking point for them as well now.
All right, well, let's switch gears here and talk about domestic issues. The White House seems to be changing course again on health care. President Trump and his budget director signaled that they'd push for an Obamacare overhaul before pursuing tax reform. So why do these agenda priorities keep moving around, you think, Franco?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't know the answer. I mean, I'm really suspicious of this new change. I don't know how they're going to all of a sudden come back and get the Freedom Caucus back on board without really pushing away some of the moderates and the Democrats. Sean Spicer talked repeatedly during the drum-up of this that they needed to get to the 216, 218 votes, that they weren't there. How all of a sudden now that they're going to be able to do that under these conditions, you got to wonder. But this is what Trump is saying. He's saying it's important. He's saying he's flexible. Maybe he's testing the waters. We'll find out.
Yeah, Tara, to follow up on Franco's point, I mean, do we have any indication that there's been some movement with some of these opposing sides on the issue of health care? I mean, it was a pretty divisive discussion, you know, when we saw the drama of having the president's top aides going to Capitol Hill, trying to get that agreement, and then we found out later there was sort of a take it or leave it kind of moment, and that didn't seem to work. Is there any indication that there's been some kind of movement or breakthrough on the part of either the conservative House Freedom Caucus members or the moderates?
I was cautioned that they have not struck a deal yet. I also think it's very telling the fact that Paul Ryan's office has not been involved in these negotiations with the Freedom Caucus or the Tuesday group. It's mostly been the White House led by Vice President Pence. And perhaps Paul Ryan doesn't want to be branded with another health care bill, a 2.0, that doesn't pass as well. But Pence right now, he's floating a lot of ideas out there about possible waivers for high-risk pools, and he's trying to win both sides. They're really committed. They're hoping they can get something, but it might be too late. And I mean, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Franco, let me ask you. The president had 3 economic priorities for Congress in the first year: health care repeal, tax reform, and an infrastructure package. Given the back and forth that we've seen, what are the prospects for getting any of those things done, do you think?
I think it's a great question. I mean, it is so hard, as we know, to get any of these issues through, especially in such a difficult environment. Democrats are absolutely not going to, or they're going to put up a huge fight on essentially anything that Trump does. They feel very wronged. Like health care, there's some, there's fracture in the Republican Party itself. I think anything is going to be very hard. To make these big ambitious goals is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Tara, it just seems as though if he couldn't get health care through, folks watching this really wonder how it is that he'd be able to get health care through a second time on a second attempt, and then go ahead and push for some of these other things, tax reform and an infrastructure bill, which, as you know, a lot of fiscal conservatives are very uncomfortable with the idea of spending as much money as could be required for that.
Right. I think that you're seeing a different approach this time, though. Whereas the health care bill was sort of cooked up on the Hill and the quiet in the offices of Speaker Paul Ryan, the White House is taking much more control over tax reform, and they're already feeling out the waters. You have Gary Cohn going to the Senate, talking to Democrats. You have Pence talking to the House Freedom Caucus. They're really trying to make this a more collective effort. I think they learned a lesson with the health care bill, and we'll see if they are able to really build any bridges. I know the president's rhetoric doesn't really help it when, he's blasting the House Freedom Caucus, he's blasting Schumer and the Democrats, but his team is trying their best to try to pull some people together and hopefully come up with something, but they're laying the groundwork for tax reform.
Yeah, Tara, on that point, I wonder, how are those tweets then and the insults received by those folks that you just mentioned? Because it is an interesting dynamic where on the one hand you have some quiet negotiations on the part of the White House, this outreach, right? But at the same time then you have a very different sort of public line from the president himself.
Right. I think that some people probably interpret these tweets as quiet threats in a way, especially with the House Freedom Caucus when the president threatened to primary some of their opponents. I think, it's not good. It wouldn't be good for them if they're not high-profile figures to be on the wrong side of the president. If they're Republicans, if they're Democrats, it just makes them look good to be on the attack, to be attacked by President Trump. So I don't know that they're effective, especially when the White House is trying to do the shuttle diplomacy back and forth to the Hill, and the president is, obviously creating waves for them. They need to coordinate a little bit better and figure out what kind of messaging they want. And I don't know if they can work with people when the relationships have become so toxic.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how that deal making goes. All right, I have to ask about the palace intrigue. I mean, there's reports of the president's decreasing faith in Steve Bannon. Bannon allies are blaming economic advisor Gary Cohn, whom you just mentioned, for undercutting Bannon's relationship with the president. What is at stake, Franco, in these stories of palace intrigue? Why should the American people care? Because a lot of times, for folks watching who don't live in Washington, who don't live in New York, it sounds like just a lot of media kind of speculation. But why does this matter?
It matters a lot. I mean, these are the individuals that are leading that White House. Donald Trump does not do it alone. He puts the people behind him, around him, that are setting the policies, setting the priorities. These are significant moves, and it's very interesting how they have kind of changed the perspective about this administration. We were talking about some of the foreign policy changes earlier. I was talking earlier today with some conservative national security experts who you may remember back last summer had raised a lot of questions about some of the foreign security priorities of Donald Trump. Now they're seeing McMaster kind of being elevated. They're seeing Steve Bannon being downplayed. They're seeing the politics go down. They're seeing some of the policy, some of the more steady hand, in their words, taking a more prominent role. And it's actually, they're actually encouraged by some of these. So some of these moves have actually turned some skeptics into some more curious individuals, and they're seeing a little bit more cautious optimism and now taking more of a wait-and-see approach.
Well, that's going to be my question, Franco. So right now, when they see things like what we just saw in Russia, when they hear the president saying that, he's not going to label China a currency manipulator, what kind of reaction does that then evoke from these folks who, as you point out, were very skeptical of the president's foreign policy?
It is, as I mentioned, it's a little bit of optimism. I mean, you pointed out Russia, you pointed out China. He changed the script on Syria, being tough on North Korea, now they're no longer calling NATO's no longer incompetent. These are major changes. China, you mentioned the currency manipulator. Calling them a currency manipulator, while this was a major issue, there's definitely truth to that. It was also a big concern because being nice to China also helps with the security issue in North Korea. For many national security experts, they see China as crucial to kind of helping with the South Pacific issues. So these are important issues, and it's very interesting watching Trump kind of take a more traditional foreign policy approach and maybe pushing a little bit away from the America first kind of strategy that he had during the campaign.
Well, Tara, go ahead.
I was going to say, it seems like Trump is grasping for friends on the international scene, from calling China a currency manipulator to saying, I'm going to work with the Chinese president. We really liked each other. We enjoyed each other. I think he's realizing that he had expectations that he could reset the relationship with Russia, like most presidents have and always say. And then when he actually got into the job, he realized how difficult they are to work with. So I think that you're seeing he called NATO obsolete. He said that was a long time ago. It was on the campaign trail,
right.
And so he's realizing
he's
he needs
though,
friends.
Tara, right? He's flexible. I mean, that's the question I have, because the president himself has said he's flexible when it comes to issues, right? His critics would say those are flip-flops, Mr. President. Is there a penalty, Franco, to this flexibility on these foreign policy issues, or even on the domestic front, not having one sort of rigid ideology? Is there a penalty for that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a credibility factor. These are what policy decisions are made of, and these are what relationships, foreign relationships, are based on. Our partnerships around the world leaders want to know that when the president, when the person in the White House says this is a priority, that they're going to stick with it. It is a major concern to them if they don't know whether the Trump administration is going to uphold the priorities that earlier, or the partnerships that earlier administrations had held. So these are extremely significant issues, and credibility. I mean, this is our word. This is who we are, and those relationships are crucial for many reasons.
Tara, is there a risk here, though, as we hear about the discord with Steve Bannon, that populist element of his base that really looked to that message of America first and heard that message and felt that it resonated with them? Is there a risk of alienating that portion of his base?
Right. Bannon kept him on track in terms of keeping him. He kept him on track in terms of trying to fulfill those campaign promises. Whereas the more moderate wing of the White House, led by Gary Cohn and Jared Kushner, they don't seem as concerned, according to my reporting, about fulfilling some of these campaign promises, even the ones that some say aren't necessary or will take up too much political capital that he may not even have anymore, like building the wall. And it's sort of, Bannon is keeping him on track with his messaging and keeping the base and remembering them. And I think Trump is walking a fine line. If he forgets the base, he may not be reelected again. But if he continues to follow them, he may run the country into a diplomatic situation, which we've already been seeing.
Right, or run the risk of not accomplishing his legislative priorities. Yeah,
exactly.
Certainly a lot at stake. Tara Palmeri and Franco Ordoñez in Washington, thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.